Good evening, everyone. My name is Brett Provenzano. I'm the proud superintendent of the Fairport Central School District. Thank you for coming and attending this evening's session on the New York State Culturally Responsive Sustaining Education Framework. Tonight, we're going to be focusing on welcoming and affirming environments. And I couldn't think of a better way to start our evening is through a song that was shared a few years back, started the school year. It's called Gratitude. We have many things to be grateful for in our district. And it's sung by Mr. Rich Green.
I think it's plain to see that all around you and me, there are good things on this earth that show us their true worth. It's easy to believe the blessings we receive deserve a little gratitude. And every day, before I go on my way, I close my eyes and I try to visualize some of the precious things this beautiful world brings, to show a little gratitude. I take some time every day to think about the good things that have come my way. I'm talking about gratitude. It's more than just an attitude. Ooh, I'm talking about gratitude. I'm talking about gratitude. It's more than just an attitude. Ooh, I'm talking about gratitude. Joy, 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 joy. Gratitude can bring you joy. Joy, 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 joy. Gratitude can bring you joy. I'm talking about gratitude. It's more than just an attitude. Ooh, I'm talking about gratitude. I'm talking about gratitude. It's more than just an attitude. Ooh, I'm talking about gratitude.
We have much to be thankful for in our Fairport Central School District. And this song is just an example. These pictures were taken throughout the summer. They're taken throughout the last few weeks of our full return to school. I'm really proud of the energy, the excitement. Homecoming was just this past week, and if you were able to see those festivities, we have many things to celebrate. And I'm proud to be working with a Board of Education that enables all these wonderful things. That is their number one priority, is to make sure that our students in our community are united around the common vision and voice of our children to do what's best for them. We have a full night. Before we get going, though, for the next hour and a half, I want to share with you some speakers who you're going to be interacting with, our principals, and we have some directors here, and district office individuals who will be sharing this conversation with you. But we're going to start with Mr. Charno. I'm going to say hello, make sure that your mic's on in the green, right?
Good evening, everybody. Ryan Charno, proud principal of Jefferson Avenue.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Erin Moretter, and I have the privilege of serving as the principal at Northside School.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jamie Naple, and I am the new proud principal at Dudley Elementary School, and I'm so pleased to be part of this district. Thanks for coming.
We're grateful for you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Bob Clark. I'm the principal here at Fairport High School. Welcome.
Good evening, everybody. Dominic Monticelli, principal at Minerva Deland. Welcome. Good evening, Dave John, principal at Martha Brown. Welcome.
Thanks everyone for coming. I'm Pat Grove, principal at JP.
Thank you, principals. I know that Mrs. Kloos, who is the principal of Brooks Hill, would love to be here and is in here with us in spirit, but she has a family commitment this evening. But she is highly invested, as you know her, as building principal of Brooks Hill. I'm going to ask Deborah Miles to say hello and share your position, and you'll be hearing from Deborah in a little bit, but just say hello. And Dr. Thevenason.
Hi everyone, I am Tanya Wilson-Davidson. Tonight is my first Fairport official event. I'm really excited to be here. I am the Deputy Superintendent of Community Engagement School Improvement and the Chief Affirming Officer. I'm excited to be here with you tonight. Kelly Whitestar, Title I, Intern and Community Access Liaison.
I'm going to have my friend Kevin Henshin, who is our Director of Professional Development, Professional Learning. He's going to share with you what you're going to do with these blue sheets. These are important, and it's going to give us an opportunity to get feedback, but go for it.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Hopefully when you walked in from the table here, you were able to grab an actual document of the framework itself and a blue sheet. Your feedback from this evening is going to be so important to us. As you know, there will be curiosities that come up along the way. So there are 3 essential questions here for you. This is your homework assignment, but actually you can turn it in at the end. It's your ticket out the door. What are we doing well here for your children in the district? Where are some more areas where we could be creating more of a welcoming and affirming environment? And that's the focus of this evening. And then any other questions or comments that you have. And we would love for you to turn this in at the end of the evening outside, right at the table. And what we also did for you at the bottom was there's a beautiful little section for you. If there is other questions or curiosities that you have, you can tear that section off at the bottom that has the contact information for both Dr. Tanya Wilson and for Kelly as well. So hopefully this will give us some good feedback as well along the way. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Henshin. Again, what we're sharing here tonight is not new. Being in the district for 16 years, being in education for 27, 28 years now, we have always talked about connecting our students, knowing our students, making sure that they have environments that are conducive to learning, caring, and sharing. And in fact, if you take a look at what's happening here in our Fairport schools, for over 25 years, we've talked about this idea of care. That is to be civil towards each other, to have all sorts of awareness of our surroundings, of each other, of all the differences that are occurring that are with individuals, individual circumstances, respecting each other, and always embracing differences. This has been our theme for over 25 years. We've heard of brotherhood, sisterhood in Fairport. So when you talk about culturally responsive environments, it's just another name for something that we have been committing to for over 25 years. In this district, as me, as an educator, as a classroom teacher, getting to know your students, making sure that they're comfortable, that they're safe, that they're willing to take risks to be the best version of themselves, that is the essence of education, and that is the essence of what we're going to be accomplishing here in our Fairport Central Schools when we talk about culturally responsive, sustaining educational framework. Tonight, again, is our Welcoming and Affirming Environment series, part of our series. On October 19th, High Expectations and Rigorous Instruction. You'll be hearing from Ellen Reed and Dr. Kristen Larson, who are 2 of our directors, who will be sharing expectations with graduation and new state standards that we are obligated and excited and honored to follow. On Monday, November 15th, again, see the Monday themes, we're going to be talking about the inclusive curriculum and assessment. And we'll be focusing on curricular aspects of the culturally responsive sustaining education framework. And in January, we hope to have another parent community session on the learning that is taking place throughout our community. But tonight we're focusing in on welcoming and affirming environment. And we're going to hopefully provide an overview of the framework and how it aligns to our vision of excellence. And again, hope that you're in here and you have children in our schools, that you've had children in our schools, and you see consistent themes that we have been engaged in through the years. We want you to see how we are providing welcoming and affirming environments. There'll be specific examples that we'll be sharing. We're going to be looking for your feedback. There'll be an opportunity to ask, and we'll do our best to answer questions. If we don't have answers, we will get back to you. We want to know what's working for your children right now, and how can we create more of a welcoming and affirming environment as we continue to move forward. When we talk about culturally responsive, you know, it's important that you recognize that you take an expansive perspective and an expansive view that considers multiple expressions of diversity. For example, race, social class, gender, language, sexual orientation, nationality, religion, and ability. It's just not about one specific group. It's all groups. All groups need to be welcomed and affirmed in our schools. We recognize differences. We need to embrace those differences, and we need to make connections and connect students to our learning environment in all of our schools. I'm going to ask our principals to take a 30-second clip and just share their perspective, not all of them, but just a handful, just to get an idea. When we talk about welcoming and affirming environments, what comes to your mind when it comes to K-5, Mr. Charno?
Yeah, at K-5, I think number one, we want kids excited to come to school. I think that's really important. At JA, one of the things we did was develop our theme with interest in the community of the Year of Friendship. So we sent out friendship bracelets. Every kid and staff member started the year with a friendship bracelet. Our PTA has our Year of Friendship t-shirt. We really wanted to start a positive tone around kids coming back to school, especially after the last 18 months. We had summer reading opportunities. And when kids first get there, I'm on the bus loop, rain or shine, the parent drop-off every single day. Miss Busby and staff members are on the bus stop. We want to greet every single kid and family member as they arrive. And again, we're out there, rain or shine, because we know that's an important start of the day. Another part is that feeling connected. And we talked about that with our staff, that our charge for those 4 onboarding days of Superintendent's Conference Day was really the importance of everything comes down to feeling connected and having relationships. And from there, all of our academic and social emotional learning will come. So we're really intentional with that within our classrooms. We'll talk more about our restorative circles and community building circles. So every student gets a chance to hear the experiences and the interests, the similarities and the differences that exist between students. But also our staff is being extremely vulnerable this year to share that not everything is perfect for adults, that we have things that are hard for us and challenging for us. And we want kids to see that. So we want them to feel connected with their peers, but also connected with adults. And another example of something we did this year, we took all of our support staff and we put them on the morning show with me to share who they are, what their role is, and then some fun questions and answers, finding out they like the Buffalo Bills, what their favorite school supply is, what type of music they listen to. So we could be proactive. So when those staff members, support members come to help kids, those kids have already seen that person in a positive light, and they feel trusting to those individuals. So there, I was more than 30 seconds, but kind of an emphasis, and I'll be happy to talk about it more, but that's just a quick glimpse at JA.
Thank you. Jamie Naple, principal of Dudley Schools.
Hey, with how fast you were talking, my watch told me to breathe there for a minute. I'm just teasing. So for me, thinking about welcoming and affirming environments kind of sits at a personal level. When I had interviewed for the position, Brett had talked to me about my ideas around the culturally responsive sustaining framework and what my beliefs were. And the thing that sits with me most of all is everybody has a spot at the table. Everybody's truths, everybody's truths are true to them, right? And those are their experiences. So it's really building those relationships, as Ryan had stated, and having a feeling of being part of the school community and family. So in that, with relationships, kids come in with ACEs, different backgrounds, different cultures, different religions, different beliefs, that we are honoring all of those. Everybody has a voice, and then working through problem solving any issues with relationships and restorative practices, which we will be talking about. So another thing that is really important is that our environment is welcoming and affirming. So our building, what we're planning on doing is having a building audit and walking around and making sure that that our literature in our library, which we do have an extensive library right now, represents the students in front of us, that we're walking into the classrooms and we know our students personally. So we may be educating about different cultures and religions and beliefs as an educational piece, but really knowing what our students are truly coming with and what their backgrounds are. So really affirming that and honoring all voices.
Definitely students need to see themselves in their learning. Intentional efforts. I really appreciate that from our elementary friends. We are going to start with Mr. Dunn. He's going to share from the middle school perspective. When it comes to culturally responsive from a middle school lens, what are some of your priorities?
5 seconds just to compliment our K-5 staff, and because they do a great job getting the kids ready for middle school. 6-8, second most critical period in development for your children, social, emotional, physical. So we really hit the mental health aspect real strongly. I'm excited about the 4 principles of culturally responsive teaching, because both Pat and I are principals of Schools to Watch, and we've got 4 pillars that we have to kind of live up to each year. It's a social equity, developmental responsiveness, academic excellence, which you'll hear a little more about next year with rigorous instruction, and organization structures and processes. So we have really focused on the social equity, making sure that we have programming for all of our students so that they hear their voices in all of the curriculum that's being taught. The developmental responsiveness, we've got quite a range. Even though we're a 6, 7, 8 building, we've got quite a range of areas that we're dealing with social emotional learning. We're also lucky to have our team structure at the middle school. We've got, if you think about it, we've got 7 teams. I think JP has 6. So these are 6 schools within a school. We have 4 core teachers that meet on a regular basis, problem solving with kids, getting to know kids, having opportunities to meet with parents, and bringing in our grade level counselors who are incredible. They'll stay with the kids for 3 years. So we really kind of double down. I think the academic excellence piece is in place pretty strong within our curriculum. But in the pandemic coming out of the last couple of years, we've really been focusing on getting to know the stories of our kids, making sure that our kids are feeling connected. And then myself and Ryan Clare, as well as has been mentioned, try to get outside of the bus loop almost every day to have that first voice of familiarity for our kids. And just have enjoyed this past year, especially truly getting to know our kids. It's really been great being back 100%. Kids are bringing some energy to school. Some days a little more than we want, but it's all good. It's all good, and we love the fact that we walk into our classrooms, they're talking, they're laughing, and they're interacting with each other. So we take our role as middle school educators very seriously, knowing that this is such a critical period in the time, and it's very, very important that we partner with our parents as well. So look forward to that this year.
It really gives us, a very specific expectation and hope that we are aware of all the stories. The pandemic brought about many stories. We saw many of our students struggle. We saw some students who just got through it, and we saw some kids who did really well during the pandemic. But how do we re-engage them? How do we make them feel connected and part of our school community in a very intentional manner? Thank you. Mr. Clark, want to speak on behalf of 912?
Yeah, so the challenge of Fairport High School, something so large, a lot of people kind of compare it to a small city, is to how do we make it feel small? And one of the ways that we do that is to involve student voice as much as possible. So we have students that participate in the hiring of teachers and administrators. We have students that are going to participate this year, for example, in the revision of the Code of Conduct. Homecoming planning, the student pep rally that we had last Friday came from student leaders, having that opportunity to kind of reclaim some rites of passage. The other thing is that we invest in student stories. The direct message from the Board of Education and Brett and certainly from the high school administration was to take time in these first couple of weeks to get to know our kids, to find out what their stories are, and to worry about the curriculum piece of things. Certainly, a lot of our teachers worry about the end in mind and exams and APs, and et cetera. But without knowing our kids' stories, our teachers are unable to connect. And so we're really investing that time in doing that. The other thing at Fairport High School, I'm sure you've seen the t-shirts around because we love our t-shirts, but the theme at Fairport High School for the last 7 or 8 years in terms of care has been proud to be a Raider, because we want our students to be proud of Fairport High School and leaving a legacy behind. It's something that it really is ingrained in our culture and in our school community, so that's a huge part of it. And very much like the middle schools, as a national Blue Ribbon School of Excellence, which we were very lucky to attain in 2018. A big part of that is our investment in things like Brotherhood Sisterhood Week, and we celebrated our 25th year last year of committing to that process and that connection between the high school kids and our friends in the elementary school. So, You know, I think on top of that, I guess I would just say the other way that we try to make our students feel welcome and affirmed is we have probably one of the most, if not the most, broad set of elective classes. We have classes that range from NASA Hunch, where our students have actually developed instruments that have been used in space, to our new multicultural viewpoints class, and literally everything in between, trying to meet our students where they're at.
Thank you very much. Our responsibility is to make sure that every single child has access and opportunities to participate and thrive and flourish and find that their story aligns with what's happening in our schools. And our Board of Education has consistently, again, this is my 7th year as superintendent, has made that a priority. And think about teaching. It's such a challenging job. It's not a job, it's a lifestyle. You have to wake up every day and create a lesson that connects with a student. That means you need to create a lesson that aligns with who they are as an individual. And that doesn't happen without that word again being intentional. We talk about intentionality when you're designing lessons and you create lessons that allow students to voice their story, to have the learning align with who they are and give them an opportunity to express themselves and grow and understand who they are as individuals. So I really appreciate all of these little vignettes that were just shared, or these little ideas on the concept of what that means. But Aaron, I'm going to put you on the spot really quick. Last week when we were talking randomly, right after a curriculum night, you spoke to a component that I think is critically important that I know that all these principals also feel.
So the part that Brett is referring to is we had just finished our Meet the Teacher night last Thursday evening. And for the first time in 2 years, we were able to welcome families back into our school buildings. And that feeling was just incredible, because I think when we talk about welcoming and affirming schools, that involves the parents and allowing parents into our buildings so that they can see what's taking place, not just for celebrations, not just on special event days, but each day, seeing the incredible things that are taking place in the classrooms. And we take a lot of pride in having full parking lots at these events, the Meet the Teachers, the meet and greets over the summer. And we want parents to come in and engage with us and their children within our school buildings. You share your children with us, and we appreciate the confidence and trust that you have in us to keep them safe, and we want you to be proud of the schools that your children attend.
Thank you so much, Aaron. And I have to say that as exciting as those parent nights are and the curriculum nights, and we have so many parents who participate, we need more. We need to continue to do better. And that's where we're trying to hold ourselves to a higher standard, and it's making sure that we get to all parents. If there's parents who don't have rides, if there's language barriers, how do we access those so our students and their families can be in our schools? That's what the culturally responsive framework means. As another example, we're going to get really technical now, and I think that we're going to have Dr. Thevenason come up and speak a little bit about the components of what the framework actually is, the inside working components of the culturally responsive framework, which, by the way, you all have the brochure that we are allowing you to have tonight.
All right, so because I have the doctor title, I get to do the teaching part of tonight, I guess. So what is this framework for us? Well, really, it's just a guidance document. It really is that, just a framework to say, these are what New York State and a group of people have gotten together to say, this is best practice. And it will help drive the changes that need to happen or the strengthening of things that are already happening in your building. So when I listen to the principals talk about the beautiful things that are happening in all of their schools, I kept hearing the same thing come up. And it looks exactly like the framework, right? They're trying to create these student-centered environments. It's all about relationships. And it's really about making sure that whatever our kids and their families are bringing to the table are seen as assets. Not just, oh, that's nice. No, we need to build and capitalize on what everybody is bringing to the table. And that's not easy to do, and it takes time, and it takes training, and we're working on our staff with that. It's also about making sure that we really have those rigorous outcomes. And we talked about that a little bit at the middle grades. Obviously, the academics are important, but you can't do those without relationships. And you can't do genuine relationships unless you know your kids in front of you. It's also about adults letting their guards down a little bit, and you all talked about that too. We've got to be vulnerable with our students. We've suffered through COVID. I know my family has. I know that everybody in this room, I'm sure it has been impacted in some way by COVID, either directly or indirectly through loss. And it's just, it's a lot for children to process that. And so for us to focus the beginning of our school year on relationships is the best thing for Fairport to do. It's also about elevating those marginalized voices. So we talked a little bit about the text that we have in front of our kids, that kids can see themselves in the curriculum. We really want to make sure that every voice is heard. It's also about making sure that students feel that sense of agency. Kids need to think and feel, not just think, feel and be empowered to create change. And that's happening at the high school. You just mentioned that, and the ways that students have voices. And I'm sure it's happening across the board at appropriate levels for kids. What it's not one size fits all, because Fairport is uniquely Fairport, right? We bring the history. We have 25 years of history of doing great things like care, like sisterhood, brotherhood. And because of that, New York State was responsive and said, we can't do just a roadmap for everybody, because everybody's coming in at different places. We all are bringing different strengths to the table. And we all have some weaknesses, but they're different and uniquely ours. So Fairport is creating their own way to address the framework, and that's part of tonight, right? We decided that this was important because you all are stakeholders in this journey with us. We cannot do it by ourselves, and so this is part one of the 4-part series. It also is not meant to exclude at all, and I know there's a narrative that exists out in the world that by affirming other people's identities, it somehow diminishes our own. But that is not at all what we're doing here, right? We can celebrate the greatness of everybody in this room and our own. And we can also say, I have things to learn, and so do you. But it's never about making anyone feel less than. It's actually the exact opposite of that. And I think it's the intentionality of making sure that everyone feels valued. It is absolutely not teaching critical race theory. And we can talk more about that as needed, but I know that that is kind of the elephant in the room all the time, right? And so I just want us to be cognizant that there's some overlap, but there's not a person in this building, in the Fairport community that I'm aware of that is an expert in critical race theory. And because of that, we're not going to teach it, right? But there is some things that you will see if you research critical race theory, that's some overlap, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. So who's involved? Well, you all are, because you're stakeholders. The kids also have a role as students. Our teachers, for sure, the school leaders, as you see tonight, the district leaders, and then even our higher ed partners. And there's also a spot in the framework that you'll see for the education department policymakers. So as you read through that framework, you'll see everyone's role in all 4 areas of the framework. So I encourage you to spend some time in that before our next session, just so you're ready for that. You want to say something, Brett?
I think it's important to recognize when I came here many years ago, again, I'm in my 16th year, we were 93-7, right? 93% white, 7% of color and other origins. So right now we are 86-14. So right in front of us over the past several years, we've had diverse, we have a diverse population. We have ENL students. When I was starting out, we had anywhere between 59 and 70 students the first couple of years. Now we have anywhere between 150 and 170 students. So it's incumbent upon us to learn and grow so we can meet all of our students' needs. And I just think that that's important to recognize. The world is diverse. And even though Fairport isn't as diverse as the world, that's for sure, it's getting more diverse. And as a parent, I want my child to be able to go to school, to be able to connect and understand that there's multiple identities, there's multiple stories, and there's multiple ways and thoughts out there that we need to come together and work and grow and learn together with. So that just kept resonating with me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for highlighting that. And like Brett ended with saying, We want our kids to be prepared for this world that they're going to enter, either in the workforce and in college. And so that's our job as educators, to make sure they're ready for those multiple viewpoints, to have an asset-based approach to life. All right, so moving on, we have our approach here at Fairport. I almost said East. You know I'm going to say that at one point. I mean, I literally ended working today. Okay, so I caught myself. But we at Fairport believe in educating the whole child, right? And so when you look at this picture of what educating the whole child looks like, it's all the pieces we're talking about. Most importantly, tonight, it's about the relationships and that creating that welcoming and affirming environment. I'm going to hand it over to Deb. Come on up, and she's going to share some more about exactly what we're doing.
All right. So thank you, everybody. Hope you can hear me. Put that down a little further. So as I said earlier, I'm Deb Miles. I'm the Director of Student Services here in Fairport, and I've actually been in Fairport for almost 20 years now, and the Director of Student Services for about 13, 14 years. So a lot has happened in that time, and I'm actually really proud to be able to represent some of that tonight. Not nearly everything that we offer your children in terms of the supports that we have for them, but certainly highlighting some of those most important aspects. So, you know, what I would just say to that last slide also is that sort of our model for a multi-tiered system of supports, and we look at academics and behavior and social emotional learning, you know, as we look at that model and make sure that each day, you know, we are focused on our students. We're trying to understand where they're coming from and what their challenges are. And we know that, you know, we have social emotional needs that have to be dealt with prior to them being able to access their learning. So that's really what that model represents, is being able to attend to every aspect of the student at school. So in terms of welcoming and affirming environments, as part of this work, our Fairport schools are reviewing school policies. We're assessing school climate through a number of ways. We are reviewing district and school data. We're providing professional development to staff and community. And, you know, Ryan Cherno had highlighted a little bit on that earlier. We actually opened our school year with some really key aspects of training for our staff. We knew we were coming back from a really challenging year and a half, and one half of the year where we were all home, as you remember, of course, and you were the teachers. And then the other year where we were only in school half of the time, and so students were balancing learning virtually, you know, getting support from parents and so forth. So we started our school year with 4 important days. The first being we had an Onward project, which is a self-care project for our teachers, because we know that our teachers need to be in a good place and they also need to be healthy to be able to attend to your students. So we had some internal staff from our mental health department and our health teachers work to develop a self-care program that we'll be highlighting every month in their faculty meetings throughout the school year, and really trying to support them on being as healthy as possible. We also then brought in some partners that I'm going to talk about shortly. And we had Dr. Melissa Heatley from the University of Rochester Medical Center spend some time helping us understand trauma-informed care post-pandemic and what that means for our students coming back after possibly struggling through some very different social times and some very different academic times. And then on our third day, we partnered with partners in restorative initiatives, and they came in and did some work with our teachers on restorative practices. So you'll hear a lot about community circles tonight as we talk with our principals. And then we wrapped up our fourth day with Children's Institute, giving our teachers some information on social emotional learning through Transformative Cell. So it was really a great way, I think, to open up our school year. It gave our teachers a different perspective to think about, other than racing into that classroom, opening those books, and hitting the curriculum hard after the kind of year and a half that our students had been through. Okay, so social emotional wellness and supports. So as I said earlier, we know that students have to be in a great place emotionally to be able to access their learning. So we have done a number of great things in Fairport. And this first partnership with the University of Rochester Medical Center is embarking on its 5th year. And we have outpatient behavioral health comes in. They spend time with our teams across our buildings at all K-12 levels, consulting on different student cases that may need extra support. We also have individual and family therapy that is offered through our clinics. We have a clinic at Minerva DeLand, and we have expanded in the past year up here to Fairport High School because we have enough families and students who need our support. So that's a licensed mental health clinic through the University of Rochester Medical Center. It's third-party payment, so families are able to get direct, easy access to these resources, a much shorter commute, obviously, to getting that support for their families. And then this year, we're expanding to the young adult adolescent chemical dependency. They're new to our contract this year in terms of coming in and helping also to support our students who are struggling with addiction and our families in terms of helping support their children. So we're looking forward to that. So I'm thinking to take a moment here to call on Mr. Clark and see if you can talk a little bit about how that actualizes in your building.
In terms of the clinic, I'm sorry, or the...
In terms of, our partnerships with, yes.
Yes. So one of the things, the beauty of construction at times is the opportunity to repurpose rooms. And so a couple of years ago, we were able to dedicate a former part of our office space into a group counseling room, which is used for crisis management and for our own staff for the counseling. And we were thrilled to have the opportunity to expand on the clinic and to be able to offer those services for our students. So that partnership with the University of Rochester has been critical in helping our mental health staff continue to develop both their internal and external knowledge on how to create pathways for families to find the supports that they need. And having it right in our building and being so close to students has been really exceptional. So we're really happy to be able to expand on that program.
Thanks, Mr. Clark. So in terms of prevention, we're looking at our Sources of Strength program and Above the Influence. Sources of Strength, we're embarking on our second year and are gearing up for our peer leaders. So we have 52 at Fairport High School and 30 brand new ones at Minerva DeLand School that we, on October 4th, are doing their first training for the school year. Sources of Strength is a suicide prevention program. And Above the Influence is a vaping prevention program. Above the Influence is intended for our 8th graders at middle school. And of course, they'll run positive campaigns that will certainly extend down to 6th and 7th grade as well as a preventative measure. But these are peer-led, evidence-based programs that use positive campaigns, positive messaging to help teach students their healthy coping skills and other ways of dealing with either peer relationships or any struggles they may have other than turning to obviously harmful measures. And the research has proven in the past that scare tactics and data and all of those things don't really connect for kids and doesn't really work. So we're using this positive campaign. They do a couple of campaigns each year, and it's all about building trusted relationships with adults in their buildings and making sure they know they have a place to go. All right, so next, when we talk about behavioral supports, again, we're looking at some preventative things here. We look at our positive behavior intervention and support teams. We have those teams in every building, K-12. Those teams exist to encourage, model, and teach positive behavior. We use school data. We use student and staff perspective through interviews and surveys, and we look at our discipline data and other types of data to attempt to design programs and lessons to teach our students, obviously, the expected behaviors and respectful behaviors that we're hoping to see in our buildings. So Erin Moretta, if I could call on you, can you talk a little bit about those Northside Heroes?
Absolutely, they're a passion of mine. So just PBIS in general truly is a passion for all of us, across the district. And 7 years ago, we began our journey of implementing positive behavioral interventions and supports in Fairport. And what it really does is it sets the tone. It sets the foundation for establishing a positive climate in each of our buildings, a climate where students are excited to get off the bus in the morning and come into school and then feel good about themselves when they leave in the afternoon. And as Deb had shared, it's really about establishing common language and common expectations within your buildings, and then explicitly teaching those behaviors to the students. So for example, at Northside, our 4 expectations are being respectful, responsible, safe, and kind. And throughout the entire month of September, we have talked about what does that look like out on the playground, in the hallways, on the bus, in the bathrooms, And we use examples and non-examples of what those behaviors look like. And then we're constantly reinforcing those behaviors with our students, and we're praising them when we see those behaviors. And the majority of our students in Fairport, all of our kids in Fairport, we have tremendous kids who are doing the right thing. They're kids. No one is perfect. Adults aren't perfect. And when we fall short of one of those expectations, we take that as an opportunity to teach and learn and coach, and we talk about how we can do better the next time. And especially at the elementary level, something, the 4 principals, truly enjoy doing is celebrating those students' successes. So what that could look like, some programs you may have seen are popcorn with the principals, or lemonade and literacy, shout outs on our morning show, positive notes home, phone calls home. Those are things that we love to do. And working with our students, they love the reinforcement. So PBIS for us is really just setting that foundation and making school a place that kids get off the bus and they don't want to walk into school. They want to run into school because they're happy to be there. That's what we want for your children.
Thank you. And Mr. Dunn, can you talk a little bit about at the middle school level what PBIS looks like?
Stage. I mean, it is a K-12 program, so there's a lot of common themes at the middle school. Be respectful, be responsible, be a learner. The nice thing about it, it is a common language that our whole staff use. Got posters, and back maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, your code of conduct was don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't wear hats, don't chew gum, don't push. Everything is in a positive vein right now. Little post-pandemic humor. Last year we were a cohort, so our phys ed department was in charge of all the social distancing videos, and we were day 1, day 2 on a hybrid schedule. So they did 4 consecutive days in a row of hand washing, mask washing, stuff like that. But it all worked out really well. What we did last year with the social distancing, and then this year coming off the pandemic, we got 100% kids in our classes. Everything is on a positive mention. We're into our acknowledgement stage right now. We're really spending some time looking to acknowledge the good behaviors the kids are doing. Prior to COVID, we were doing quarterly assemblies where the kids would come down in grade levels. They would do a game format and have a chance as teams to compete for prizes. Again, reinforcing the common expectations that we have. We've also taken a look at the discipline model that we used to have in the past, majors and minors, and we really have done a lot of work with our staff to have them own the minors, the small pieces that come into the classroom, and the larger pieces we call majors, they would then send to the referral. And we found as our data teams are constantly looking at this information that the amount of majors that we've had to deal with in the past have decreased because a lot of the teachers are owning these small behaviors before they get large. And at middle school, I think that's important to kind of help set the tone for them. The next thing I would just say on both middle schools is that our committee is well represented of counselors, administrators, support staff, teachers, and parents. So there's always room to have parents on the committee. We're looking for a few more parents this year at the middle schools to kind of help us work through this post-pandemic with PBIS.
Thanks, Mr. Dunn. So, Mr. Monticelli, I am a parent of a 9th grader. Tell us about the Raider Way.
Yeah, gladly. Again, good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's very, very proud of you and appreciate your support. And I'll ask for more of that tonight in my dissertation here. Just kidding, won't be that long, hopefully. So the Raider Way, it's all very similar. It's what we call PBIS at Minerva DeLand, and I say it like this: you're in high school now, so you're a Raider now, right? And these are the expectations we have for each other, for one another, and this isn't something the staff delivers to students. We build that together, and we ask our students, how do you want to be treated from your peers, from your teachers, and we make these very simple expectations together. In fact, we have a meeting tomorrow with staff, parents, and students to continue to build this year. One example, we do donuts, we do the shirts on a monthly basis. Last year, I think we gave out like 350 shirts. So thank you to our PTSA for their support of our program. Shout out to our PTSA if you're not involved, or if you can't get involved because of time, please just donate if you can. There's a website that helps us, specific to Minerva DeLand, to help fund this program. But we do those things to nominate not just a student of the month, once a month, one student, to nominate many students to catch them doing the right thing. I think another way to say this is, how do we get kids to think doing the right thing is cool, right? Because I can say great job, high five in the hallways, but to get a 14-year-old to really think doing the right thing is cool, that's the challenge. And I would say being a 14-year-old is hard. If you try to remember back to your when you were 14, you probably blocked it out because it wasn't very pleasant. It's harder than ever in this digital world we're all living in. So I think that's our challenge as education as a district and as parents, is to really how do our coach our children through this digital world we live in right now. And it is a challenge. You know that. I'm a parent myself. It's really, really messy, and we build relationships, and that's a positive message, but it gets messy sometimes. So that's going to be our focus this year, the 3 R's: respectful, responsible, and resilient, but doing that in an online world and platform. So we're going to talk a lot about digital citizenship, and we just say digital community. Now, again, I've had a few referrals so far this year. Everyone is connected to online behaviors, every one of them, and it spills into school and it spills into your children's lives. So I don't want to be negative, but that's the reality of our situation and society. And you're going to hear a lot about the Raider Way and building this program together. And I would ask you to help in those conversations and to encourage your kids to come to me with ideas on how can we make doing the right thing cool. And also want to shout out to Mr. Reuter, one of our tech coaches. You can expect like a monthly pro tip for parents on simple things like what's a resource I can use to help have this conversation with my students. So sorry for the long answer.
Thank you. Okay, so this next support that we are using, Restorative Practices, we've done a lot of work in the past 3 years to get everybody trained. And this is really bigger than a tool or a strategy. It's almost a way of being and a mindset shift for sure. So that is our focus in Fairport, is to help get everybody understanding what restorative practice is, feeling comfortable using it in their classrooms and school environments, and being able to share those opportunities with students. So we have trainers. So we have 18 trainers in district where we went off and spent a significant amount of time with partners in restorative practices. We then took 20 additional staff to do community circle training, which was a 3-day training. We spent a summer, a couple of days in a summer, 2 summers ago, with our administrative team, our principals and our assistant principals, doing restorative discipline. And then starting last year, but really finishing the majority of them this year, we had all of our teachers participate in 3-hour community circle training prior to opening our school year. We also have offered as a professional development course for teachers that are interested to take academic circle training throughout the school year. And that just offers them an opportunity to learn the skills of using circles in their academic classroom with their curriculum, whether it's, processing a novel they're reading, having a conversation in humanities class, or so forth. So again, an effective tool or practice. We're definitely excited about this. We continue to move through our implementation plan nicely, and we're excited to see as we walk throughout our buildings that teachers are definitely using this. The kids are probably, they came home to you and said they were sort of sick of circles, because I think for the first couple of days of school, they did a lot of that, spending time getting to know their teacher and each other in their class. So I'm going to take a moment here to, Jamie, you want to tell us a little bit about what circles look like at Dudley?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So this goes back to, thank you, Ryan, for the thorough description earlier. And he had talked a little bit about restorative practices. And I was fortunate coming in to have had peer training with my last school district. And we had done academic circles as well as restorative circles, as well as just community building circles. And essentially what that looks like is that you're giving, again, everybody that chance to have that voice in a conversation. So you'll see in the morning many times teachers will lead with an opening question, and that everybody in the class has an opportunity to share their thoughts about that question that is posed, as well as another round of circles if there's any connection. So you're building that community. Hey, I connected with what you said over there, further building those relationships. Another thing that I think is really important, so academic circles, yes, so everybody gets a chance to have their voice heard. So it's really about a protocol in building that level of trust and relationship to be vulnerable and to share from your experiences. I want to talk a little bit about restorative discipline because I'm very passionate about this. So you have a situation, adults, children, when something happens that you need to problem solve and work through a situation, everybody comes with their truth and their side of the story. So really what restorative practice is, so let's say there's a situation where a student's very upset in the classroom, leaves the room, the teacher's upset, another student is upset because there's been an argument that has taken place. A lot of times you just have to give time away from the situation. Let everybody get back to baseline, but then coming back and restoring that relationship. It's very important to hear all sides and different perspectives, because when somebody comes at me as an adult with a situation or question, you want to know exactly where this is coming from, what the root cause is, and really problem solve. So we do that with our students as well. So typically what we'll do is after a situation has occurred, to be able to re-enter back into the classroom or having the group feel comfortable, it's really going back with the group. And I've been part of some of these conversations, and sometimes teachers have felt comfortable and have built that community within their classroom to say, okay guys, let's circle up. This is what happened. Let's talk about it. How is everybody feeling? But of course in a safe, supportive way. I have also conducted these with staff members and students. So where there's been like a misunderstanding, well, where did this come from? It came out of nowhere. Well, there is a root cause. There is a truth to this. And here's what was shared with me. And then we sit around and talk about it and restore that relationship and do the, the apologies that need to take place to get everybody feeling comfortable and everybody to feel safe in that classroom environment and to carry on with the day. Again, the restorative discipline piece may take a bit of time, and sometimes it just takes the emotions to get down at a baseline level, and then we have those restorative conversations so that everybody feels part of that community.
Thank you. Mr. Charno, you want to talk a little bit about what circles look like at JA?
I'm not going to add too much to that. It's very similar, hence we were all in the same training, so that's a good thing. The one thing I want to point out, to be honest with you, it's kind of that absence makes the heart grow fonder. Last year, as my first year principal in the pandemic, and we're in hybrid, and we're in small densities, I really didn't get a chance to have many restorative conversations for students to see how their actions impacted others. And then the most important piece, the growth piece. Like, what are we going to do next time to make sure we're not making that person feel uncomfortable, unsafe? And to me, those are my favorite parts of what are occurring in the classroom in my conversations. I did not get a chance to do that last year. And so already I've had a number of bus conversations, even bringing the bus driver in to share how those actions have impacted others. And it's amazing to see that students, when they hear not knowing how their action impacted another or others, it's mind-altering for them. They legitimately have a totally different perspective. So as we're building a classroom community in classrooms, that's where students are getting a chance to hear every rater, every story, and hearing the multiple stories and getting to know each other, peer-to-peer and peer-to-teacher. Our teachers are being intentional to often be a part of these as well, so they can share their story on their side. But then the restorative piece is that growth piece. How are we going to help students when they get in peer conflict and they're feeling those big emotions? What are they going to think about or do next time when they pause for a second before they act? And that's one of my favorite parts, is teaching our students how they can be better next time and how they're going to grow from the experience.
Thank you. I haven't forgot you, Mr. Groh. You ready? Circles at JP.
Always ready. No, Jamie and Ryan did a great job explaining like how we run them at school, and it doesn't differ much except for some of the content maybe, at the middle school level about what we're talking about. But it comes back to the word we keep using tonight, is connecting. It's trying to restore those connections between kids with each other, between kids and teachers, and even when we get to our level, a lot of times with the admins, where the kids are nervous. Certainly some of our newer sixth graders coming in, and they come down to my office or Mrs. Short's office, my assistant principal, and they're nervous because that associates them with trouble sometimes too. And the mindset shift we talk about, and I've been an administrator for 20 years. When we talk about trying to make sure those kids feel good when they're walking out of your office, even if they've done something that doesn't quite meet expectations, is a priority now, because we want them to be able to learn from it, where they're coming from it, letting them know, of course, they're going to make mistakes. They're young. It's going to happen right there too. But how do we make sure moving forward they know our expectations, but they know we've got resources for them to work with if they're feeling a certain way, and how we can work together to make sure we're growing and moving forward in a positive way. It's been awesome because it involves the parents as we get moving, and we want them involved because, again, as we talk about the community circles, about where they're going, we start talking to the kids, certainly at our level, as they're getting ready for high school, about your impact on others, what people are going to view you as, who you want to be as a person, and those type of things, to try to make sure they're ready for what's coming for them. Because as Dom said before too, it's a tough world on these kids sometimes with the social media. There's different pressures and things like that than we faced maybe when some of us were younger. And I want to make sure they're trying to be ready for that to come through when they have that opportunity. So these circles have been wonderful for us, as not only to get to know you, to get to know each other, but to really problem solve, to make sure the kids are feeling in a safe spot where they can talk about their feelings, but also understand the expectations that comes with being these young teens and moving on to those high school years.
Thank you. Okay, so to finish my section, this next slide really speaks to one of the probably most important projects I'm working on this school year, and that's our Code of Conduct review. So we are taking a look at our current Code of Conduct and doing so through a restorative and equity lens, and looking to really do a complete overhaul on our Code of Conduct. I don't know how many of you have actually looked at our Code of Conduct, but it's 35 pages embedded somewhere on our website of, as these guys were saying earlier, a lot of don't do this, don't do that, do this, do that. So we really want to, modernize that, bring it up to speed in today's, world, and also take a look at a restorative approach to how we really teach our students what our expected behaviors are and how to act toward those. So we have a stakeholder committee of administrators, staff, parents, students, and community partners. By the way, we're still looking for more parents and students. We are providing training in restorative practices, equity, and diversity. Those were some of our opening meetings. We are reviewing our Fairport Central School District data in terms of discipline, demographics, and so forth. We are reviewing our existing Code of Conduct, taking a look at each category within that Code of Conduct, and then also reviewing Code of Conducts from area districts, Syracuse area, Rochester area, and so forth. And then rewriting our Code of Conduct with a restorative lens, a focus on equity, and aligning with our board policies and practices. And our timeline looks like we actually began this work in July. We meet monthly as a large group, and then Kelly Weishar and myself meet monthly also with partners in restorative initiatives to plan the meetings. And we are hoping to be at the Board of Education in May with an entirely new Code of Conduct. So we're looking forward to that. And as I said, if parents are interested in joining, we're looking for more help. So Kelly, you want to come talk a little bit about Rock to Change?
Thank you. I love to talk about Rock to Change. I'll talk a little bit, and then we're going to invite Mr. Monticelli to jump in as well, because he's been very close with this work we've been doing. Rock to Change is something that started many years ago in 2016. And it is a community Monroe County-wide effort. And we participated as a Fairport school with our students right from the beginning, and we have every year. We've, of course, had an interruption due to COVID, but it's a collaborative. What happens is that the Rock to Change is kind of an overall organization, and twice a year, different schools host what we call the Student Summit on Race. And again, this has been going on since 2016, so we've had a number of them over the years. And there's one usually in November and usually in March. And about 40 schools attend, so it's a rather large event with close to 400. We've had up to 600 students at various times. It's all student planned and facilitated. That's the main rule of Rock to Change, is that when a student summit on race occurs, it's developed by students, it's facilitated by students, and students are the main participants with adults there for support. And it's really a time, it's a full day for students to come together, again, connecting across the county because over 40 schools are there. And it's a time for courageous conversation about race and diversity. And it's a time for them to start to develop action plans. One of the things, again, we won't go into great detail today, but when you get a chance to look at your framework, you'll see a whole section for students because they are a stakeholder group. And one of the main charges the students have are being agents for positive social change. And Rock to Change is one of those ways that students can participate. We are very lucky. We are hosting coming up in November 22nd, and we're collaborating with Rochester City School District, School Without Walls, and St. John Fisher College to host this year's Student Summit on Race. And again, I'll invite Mr. Monticelli. He's been involved in all the work we've been doing so far, and it's been exciting work to be part of.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Weissar. So you summarized it pretty well, but I would just say that this is a fantastic opportunity. Our students, and I've really enjoyed just being in the room while the students are planning this. And I'll share again, as Mrs. Weissar said, this is not something that we are delivering to students. We are not teaching students what to think. We are simply creating a safe space for them to come to the table and have conversations with one another and figure out how to think. All right, not what to think, how to think. And again, the biggest piece is a safe space. There's different students from very different stories, every rater, every story, very different perspectives that bring a different lens to the table. And again, as you can tell by now, I'm very passionate about face-to-face conversations instead of electronic conversations. So that's what this is. We've had great experiences, like I said. This is a big event, but students can be a part of it. I'd say, talk to your children if they want to be a part of this. It's not too late. We have a month of planning left. They can contact Mrs. Weissar, Mr. Clark, or myself in our respective buildings. We also, if they don't want to be part of this big event, if they just want to be part of face-to-face conversations and bring their own lens to these types of conversations, each of our buildings has a club as well, student leadership team, club, I call it student leadership team because that's what they are, and the Dream Club at the high school. So if they just want to dip their toes in a little bit and just come to the table and listen and start to build community with their fellow peers, then there's multiple opportunities within our buildings and within this large, community event.
Thank you very much, Mr. Monticelli. And I want to also highlight that it's a chance for them to develop action plans. During the event itself, they are usually given time to plan as a team what they would like to have happen back in their districts, how they want to contribute, what they want to see in terms of creating that welcoming and affirming environment or being that agent of social change. Again, we're empowering students, and this is an example of how they can participate in that process. Mr. Monticelli mentioned the Dream Club, and the Dream Club was actually a club that was created because students went to the summit and decided to come back and create it. All student-driven, again, giving them the space and time to develop what they need and what they want. The last one I'll talk about is in terms of things going on here is Diversity Council. Diversity Council is a collaboration between the Fairport Central School District and parents and community members. It started a couple years ago. We had some interruption due to COVID, but last year we were able to meet as the council virtually all year long. And it's an advisory group to the superintendent. The focus is on topics related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and culturally responsive practices. And there's multiple stakeholders. Just like with the Code of Conduct group, we're very intentional in making sure that we have many voices and many different experiences at the table to help us with these conversations. Parents, community members, Board of Education representatives, teachers, administrators, and students are all present as part of the council. What we did, we focused on 4 areas, and they are, again, our primary area of focus: culturally responsive and inclusive curriculum and instruction, data and policy, family and community partnerships, and human resources, which focused on diversity in recruiting and hiring. And what we did is by the end of the year, we produced a report. So if you're interested in learning more about the Diversity Council, this final report with the cover that looks just like that is up on the website. So you're welcome to read about it and get more details about the functioning of the council and the kinds of conversations they had throughout last year, again, leading to the recommendations that they produced. And we are taking those recommendations and sorting through them and prioritizing in terms of which ones to work on and which ones are in alignment with the framework as we implement the culturally responsive sustaining education framework. That's a very long title. It really is. Again, you can find more information on the website, so I certainly invite you to do that. What we want to highlight here is you've just had all this time and you've heard a lot of exciting things that are going on in all the buildings, in all the various age levels. And we want to take a minute to talk about your role as parents and community members. There is, again, as you have looked through this, you'll see again that each of these stakeholder groups get recommendations or get items that they might work on or how they might contribute to this process of becoming more culturally responsive. And they're in the very 4 areas of the principles. We can see they're in creating a welcoming, affirming environment, high expectations and rigorous instruction, inclusive curriculum and assessment, and engaging in professional learning. So we invite you, it starts on page 42. So when you have time to go through and read your role as parents and community members. Again, this is a collective group of guidance and wisdom of how we all have a role in this. And we really invite you. We really, really want to develop those partnerships. We really want to develop the collaboration to bring this welcoming and affirming environment, as well as the other areas of the framework, alive in our own community. So I summarized it here. We went through and we looked at what are the themes in terms of what parents can do. And the first one is advocacy. That is in every single category is again, having you be the advocates for your family, what your family needs, how your family can gather information from the district, and what your children need. It's communication. That's highlighted in every part of the framework, again, for parents and community members, is to develop that way of communicating with the district so you can be comfortably sharing what your needs are. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. Partnerships with school staff and parents, again, a theme throughout what parents and community members can do, as well as an invitation to share your cultural assets. Again, the whole framework is premised upon the fact that these cultural assets, or these things that are unique to your identities and your family's identities, are positives for the teaching and learning process. And again, it's creating that relationship. We've talked a lot tonight about the relationships with the children right here in our classrooms with teachers, but we want that same kind of relationship with you in terms of your comfort level to share those cultural assets, to be asking questions and finding out what's going on in your children's classroom. And then there's various ways in the framework of how you can support your children's roles in your community and getting to know your community better. So those are just the general ideas. What we also did is give you just a bit of a sheet. And that's to take some of these general recommendations and share with you specific ways of how you could do those things. This sheet talks about how you can work with your children on goal setting. There's a whole section on communication because we really want parents to know and understand that we can have the availability of translation services, of various modes of communication, if you prefer email versus a text versus a phone call. You know, all those things are things parents can advocate for that helps improve that relationship and that bi-directional flow of information that helps us work with your children better. So, and sharing your expertise, again, with that cultural asset pieces, that's the kind of things, again, we're taking not only to know your student stories, but how do we know your whole family stories in a collaborative way? So we can be creating that welcoming and affirming environment so you can feel comfortable interacting with school. So we really wanted to take our time and share our hopes and our wishes that you will look at that document, maybe ask questions about it, maybe take some ideas from there, ways that, again, you can be partners with us in this work for the culturally responsive work that we're doing. So that's it. I'll turn it over to you.
Well, we transition to the next part. I just think it's important just to highlight the fact that we talk about critical thinkers. We want students to be globally, locally connected. We want them to be able to think critically. If you take a look at the world around us, Mr. Monticelli was talking about social media. The big word is discernment. How do you develop these skills in our students? Because you know what? As parents, we won't be with our children every single minute or for every major decision that they're faced with. We want to give them critical thinking skills that allow them to be mindful. So when we talk about social emotional learning, restorative practices, being good listeners, being empathetic, trying to understand perspectives and narratives, stories. Everyone has a unique perspective. And our responsibility is to give students the skills to be able to make judgments, to discern information. So that's how you can continue to distill this. And when we talk about our next community forum, when we talk about rigorous expectations and academic standards, we'll be talking more about these ideas too. So that's a theme. But in order to get our students to do that, we need to have them do these metacognitive practices, and we need to be thoughtful and think about our thinking, think about other people's thoughts and how they view the world. And there's multiple different lenses, there's multiple different perspectives just in this room. So we want to open this up to questions, and I'll let Tanya to come in and facilitate this piece.
Great. So we are happy to take some questions and comments now, if you feel comfortable, or you can leave them on your blue note catchers. So anybody want to start? Yeah, go ahead.
How will you measure success of this responsive, sustaining educational framework? Is there a measurement for that? How do you know that it's being productive?
That's a great question, and it's one the board actually asked us 2 Mondays ago at the board workshop, right? So thank you for asking. We are developing a comprehensive implementation plan, and through that will be measures that we will report back to the community and to the board. Absolutely.
So that's not fair for you to jump in on that
Well,
one. So
that's okay, but
great.
that is part of it,
But
right?
I'm going to ask Deb Miles to come up a little bit. We're going to be talking about a perception survey. There's qualitative and quantitative data that we're going to be getting through this process. We'll be reaching out to parents to get baseline information. Multiple times throughout the year, we will then be checking back to say, how are we doing? But we're not only going to just do that with parents, we're going to do that with our students too. Getting that information, sharing that information with the board. Those are ways that we can measure our growth, measure our success. Another way that we could do that is, I'm going to ask our principals, when you go into classrooms, what are some of the things that you see from a teaching supervision perspective? And I think that's another way that we can measure the level of, hey, does this have traction? All of our educators receive evaluations. I'm going to ask somebody just to jump in and take that.
Just wanted to comment, as a Schools to Watch principal, Pat and I both 4 years being recognized. We have to reapply every year, so you never really get there. You're always reapplying. So I look at the Schools to Watch framework. I look at the culturally responsive framework as really a method for continual improvement. So how are we going to measure success? A year from now, we're going to be able to see what we're doing 10 months from now compared to what we're doing here today. And I'm excited because it's not just me as a building leader. I got district leaders, I've got parents, I've got students, I've got community, and I've got families to help support and move this forward. So not as much for me as success, but a year from now, are we at a better place than we are right now? And that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah.
Since this is a New York State program, what are they expecting you to measure and report back to them?
Right, so they're actually not expecting us to measure or report back on this. It is just exactly what it is, a guiding document. And we can take that and implement it in the ways that make sense for us. And so for us at Fairport, that's why we're going to come up with our own plan of implementation and outcome measures, including the perception survey that we're doing with qualitative and quantitative data. So we've got all of that.
The wonder of education sometimes is you don't always get that immediate feedback, right? That lesson, comes to life 20 years later when you see somebody in Wegmans and you see them and they speak to the wonder of our schools. We just had our Hall of Fame induction this past weekend. These were individuals from multiple different perspectives, identities, different disciplines. That's another way that you measure it. We'll be doing satisfaction surveys, asking our graduates, how are we doing? How did we do? As soon as you get out of college, out of high school, when you're 5 years in, 10 years in, and so on and so forth. So, these are some ways that I'm excited to develop and report out how we are doing.
Another way that we had explored this in the last district, and something that I am hoping to do at Dudley, is looking at office referrals. So when there's a situation that happens within a classroom that may need a level of a consequence, yes, but then also tracking in there, and I see that School Tool has the drop down for restorative practices. So making sure that we look at a full situation, we just don't take it face value of the narrative that's written before you, but really pulling apart all of the pieces and making sure we're doing our due diligence to do a restorative piece as well. So it's looking at that discipline data and really making sure we're hitting what we need to hit. And when I think of PBIS and Tier 1 supports that are holistic, what are those other things that we need to also be doing and measuring and tracking that maybe at a Tier 2 level, perhaps we're doing the check-in, check-out, and we're bringing those pieces in. So those would be other dipstick data points that we're looking at or will be looking at or have looked at.
Throwing a lot at you, but who's taking what courses? How many students are taking AP courses? Who's going to hire education as we move forward. Who's participating in extracurricular activities? Who's participating in performing arts? And trying to track that early and then through individuals' high school career. So we're going to be creating a dashboard for accountability purposes, and we'll be communicating with the board what are our priority benchmarks, what do we want to view as areas of growth, so we could see it on our dashboard, if you will. That's a lot. I didn't mean to throw at you. And you like how I invited Deb up and I answered all her questions too. So.
Is that how he does it? You didn't even.
How'd I
try to
do, Deb?
move. That's perfect.
You trained me well. Thank you.
All right.
Yes.
To piggyback on that, I'm wondering, there were a number of times when you mentioned reviewing district data. So it was in the welcome and affirming environment, it was in PBIS,
Right.
In any of those situations, do we already have baseline data, and is it looked at in a disaggregated way so that we can be looking at different areas?
The discipline data, we are just collating, and we are making that a priority conversation to review that quarterly and sharing reports as per our board policy. I also want to speak again to what's happening in our student support teams in each of our buildings, because there's some really powerful data work that's occurring there. So if you want to take a moment to speak to that.
Press a little harder. Yeah, so, on a weekly basis, we review academic data, as well as when I spoke to PBIS, monthly at our team PBIS meetings, we review monthly building data. And using the software that we have, it breaks it down by location, by incident, so we are able to, look at it, see trends. I can share with you, historically, the bus is a hotspot for elementary school. And so when we see locations where behaviors are, peaking, our response is, how are we going to address it? So one way that we've, addressed bus issues in the past is we have had Northside School rides a bus day, and we have our staff boards the bus. We talk about the school connection, with transportation. We engage in conversations with the students. So, looking at that data really helps us then be proactive to prevent, bigger issues.
Yeah, are you looking at it desegregated by age, by race, by gender?
Yep.
Yes, we are. We have that ability with our programming to break it apart.
Socioeconomic status as well. When I came to Fairport, we were, again, 7% free and reduced lunch. And there, we have buildings as high as 25% now. And that has implications. And there's disproportionality there. There's disproportionality with race and even with special education. So we've identified areas where we need to focus on, including the access to all those academic programs, extracurricular activities as well. So those are priority areas that we'll be developing and making part of our dashboard, if you will.
See a question over here.
But I'm sorry, we had one over here and then we'll come here.
I kind of wanted to piggyback off of, maybe it's not piggybacking, but for restorative justice, it sounds great, wonderful. Do you guys have specific examples of what you would do as far as restorative justice, not just at an elementary level, but as kids grow in life, consequences and actions are a little bit higher? Like recently, they're destroying bathrooms, it's a TikTok trend.
Yep.
To restore, that implies that something, the offended party is made whole. What are you guys doing specifically for that? I mean, if the goal is to restore, what are they doing to actually put that?
Yeah, so I'm just going to say that that is like a significant aspect of our reviewing our code of conduct. And so we have work to do to develop what those interventions look like differently than detention, lunch detention, after school detention, suspension, in school, out of school, right? Those are the traditional discipline or interventions that we've done in the past. We are moving in the right direction. We have a lot of work to do in terms of identifying what that looks like and realigning that code of conduct. But since you brought it up with the little TikTok challenge, I'm going to call on Mr. Clark because he has a perfect example of how we're heading in that direction. So Mr. Clark, let's talk about what we did restoratively with that situation.
Absolutely. So we're obviously in a bit of transition because that code of conduct that is restorative in nature is not built yet. But since we've been through that training, I think that we'd like to think that a lot of times that's been a bit of our mentality anyways. The reality is that when students do harm within the building to themselves, to other students, to staff members, et cetera, we're always looking to repair those relationships because the reality is they need to come back into that classroom, back into that environment, and what does that look like? So, specific to the TikTok challenge, and that sort of idiocy that kind of went across the country like within a week. It was about understanding, like, when you destroy school property, like, who's impacted by that? It's our maintenance staff. And I think a big part of that, honestly, is the people sitting in this room. The restorative piece of things only goes so far as our partnership with parents. If a parent is not inclined to have a student participate at that level, then it's hard for us to bridge that gap. But so far, we find a lot of, I think, positivity in that, and reaching out to parents and asking for that support. I can share with you, like, specifically in this one example, we had that student do a little bit of, there was some traditional discipline, and then we also followed with, so it was a little bit lesser in degree than maybe we would have done in the past. And then we provided an opportunity for that person to work with our maintenance staff, because that impacted their day significantly. And I can share with you the best part of that moment, and this is going back to something that Ryan had said earlier, was the moment I introduced the student to the staff member. And there was shame in her face. And I don't welcome the shame, but it is a good thing to understand that the appropriate emotion was there, and to understand that she impacted this other person's literally hours of his day in order to go around the school and repair some of the things that had been done. And, he was very gracious in welcoming the students' participation. And I think, I've seen her on at least 2 or 3 occasions now interact with that staff member in a positive way. And so there's great benefit to it. But again, I think a key part of that process is when we reach out as administrators or teachers is to ask for your support and your partnership in that, understanding that we have the students' best interest at heart, and it's not about shame and blame necessarily, but it is an opportunity for them to repair some of the harm that they've done.
So I'd even jump on that. I'm going to ask Mr. Monticelli to warm up his mic, or any of my middle school colleagues. When you're dealing with a social media issue, it really gets raw. I mean, you want to talk about, how we treat each other and the interactions that occur. Our students are engaged in that. And how do you speak in a restorative lens when you're working with, sometimes it's a web, you're working with multiple different layers of individuals. How are you trying to bring resolution, resolve, and some sort of healing to that process?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So similarly, we had a physical altercation in the second week of school, connected to some social media comments that were made. But there was a lot of people impacted. The 2 students that were engaged with the physicality, the entire cafeteria. Our Century is a fantastic community member, but she was impacted by that. She was physically harmed by, trying to keep students safe. And we had a student that was in the middle, that's friends with both of these gentlemen, who was trying to, in his own way, do the right thing, but he made things worse by getting involved. So we had all those people, as the students were re-entering, sitting around and having a conversation, uncomfortable conversation, but they were looking each other in the eye instead of doing this over text or whatever, Snap, whatever they call it.
Snap face.
I apologize.
Kids are so young.
I've got a long way to figure out what's cool for teenagers. I understand that, but in all sincerity, similar approach. If this was 5 years ago, the consequence would have been larger, and the time spent would have been smaller, and it would have been, is the school safe? Okay, back to school. This was look that person in the eye and have a conversation and have a full understanding. They're teenagers. They don't think about other people for the most part. Let's be honest. But to really stop and think about how they impacted others, I think is a powerful example, from Ryan said, from younger age all the way up, and even adults. We have to stop and pause for a moment and interact with one another in that manner.
Thanks, Mr. Monticelli. So just to wrap up your question, I would just say that this is a work in progress. Like, we have lots of great ideas, but we also can't get too far ahead of the professional development that comes for our teachers. So thinking about restorative discipline in the classroom, they need a lot of training around that. Our code of conduct needs to catch up to that. So we're looking forward to next year for sure.
The thing that really gave me some chills here, when you have these high school guys speak to what's happening at the elementary, and it's development, it's a developmental continuum. And the little students and their issues become bigger issues as they go along, and so on and so forth. And again, how do we get them to share their thoughts, to be critically thinking about their impacts of and having high levels of awareness. That starts really young, and that means introducing them to multiple different perspectives, multiple different ways to think through their issues. Mr. Clark.
I just wanted to add one very small piece of that into the K-12 perspective. You know, that TikTok thing that happened in Fairport High School, within 10 minutes of making an announcement to the entire student body, I had probably 25 students report to adult staff members where they thought the issues were and who did it. And I think that speaks to the culture that we create with the positive behavior intervention and having this common language all the way up. And just if you see something, say something, because our students are proud of their school and they want it to be safe. And, you know, I think it was a testament to our building and our kids and the work that you do as parents, that our kids would want that to be nipped in the bud. And it was a very small issue for us because of that. So I'm thankful for being on the tail end of that work over 12 years and what that means in terms of the culture of Fairport High School.
So I would even say, you know, it is exactly that. It's a systems approach and doing it in a developmentally appropriate way. Thank you. I think we had a question here. Sorry.
Yes, there's been a lot of talk lately in the newspapers. We see that currently the undergraduate population is currently comprised of 60% females or more, 60% or more, only 40% males. And this happens even on the graduate levels. In medical schools, law schools, there's a disproportionate number of females. And there's a lot of talk about why that is. What I've observed as a parent and in for other professional capacities is that there, in the past 2 or 3 decades, there's been a lot of attention being paid to creating supportive programs for females in schools, especially and including STEM programs, and which is wonderful. But as a result, I think there's been so much emphasis in that area. The pendulum has now swung, and I, as a parent of a 18-year-old son, I am concerned that there are going to be many far-reaching societal consequences that are going to be negative for everyone, not just for these boys who are being left behind, but for everyone. So I, as a parent of a son, and I have a daughter, nonetheless, I'm very concerned about what districts around the nation, including Fairport, is doing to create a supportive, a welcoming and affirming environment, particularly for these boys who are being left behind. As they go through their academic career, they get further and further behind. So obviously, the high school, middle school, but particularly the high school, would be a key area where these boys need that support. And they need, if it's special programs, a lot of them are not going to college, and when they do get to college, they are dropping out. And this has been projected to become a problem in the next decade. They're projecting it's going to be 30% men, 70% men. We can't continue with this. What is Fairport going to do to address?
So I have 3 boys, and the pride and joy of my life too. So I'm with you on that. So I would have to say that you're going to see we have a strategic plan. We have strategic initiatives, and there's a career vocational awareness plan. And it doesn't start at the high school. It starts at the elementary. We have a comprehensive counseling plan that I know that Miles can speak to, that we need to do, again, intentional efforts to set goals and priorities so everybody knows our students are engaged early and often in looking at multiple different pathways for success. And again, that's going to be our next seminar as well, when we're going to be talking about those pathways. But it does start early. It's just not a high school conversation. And Mr. Clark spoke to the number of electives that we have and extracurricular activities that we have. We're fortunate here in Fairport, but how do we intentionally connect those to career pathways, I think, is your point. And that's going to be part of our strategic initiatives that we'll be talking about in November. I don't mean to pass it off to them, but we're aware of the need to be intentional there.
So we are considering having a little bit of counseling. That's wonderful. But are there any academic programs in place that are going to be specific specifically designed to support boys when they're making these decisions, you know, as early as elementary school. Boys start out strong in elementary school. They're left behind somewhere along the line. I've witnessed that.
Yeah, so we have all sorts of, like I spoke to our MTSS, our multi-tiered systems of support. So we have those interventions in place to support all learners. I think too with the boys, a lot of that is the mentoring as we go along and making sure those adult relationships are strong, and they're mentoring boys to, have academic goals, have future plans in terms of how to reach those goals, and work with their school counselors and so forth. Like I said, we have a comprehensive guidance plan that addresses all of our learners across. We look at the data questions were coming up earlier. There's lots of data in that in terms of what we compare to other districts and so forth. It's certainly a concern. We definitely need to be creative in how we address it, but I do think it is with the mentoringship. I think it is with taking a look at all of our programming and making sure that all of our learners have access to the right courses and the right pathway to help them be successful after high school.
We have time for one more question, just to be respectful of everybody's time. Hi. Thank you. It's like you're reading my mind. I appreciate it. I wanted to say that early on. We do have all this information on our website. We will be streaming this session to the greater community as well as we move forward too. So for those who missed it, we'll be able to see bits and pieces of it. We will be collecting the capture sheets. If you would, Mr. Henshin, do we have a plan to collect those? What's our best? Put them in on the table in the. Yep, we have people at the door that you can hand those off to us, and we really do appreciate your time and opportunity to partner with you. Have a great evening, and please drive safely. Thank you for coming.